Okay, so hello everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to this knowledge sharing session organized by EADI, the European Association of Development Research and Training Institutes. We are a European network for development studies and international development, and this is the first in a series of knowledge sharing sessions. So today's session will take place in the form of a roundtable with the authors of a commentary section on the subject of research practice collaborations, or RPCs, published in EADI's journal, the European Journal of Development Research. So we have a packed session ahead of us, and we will be keeping a good clip. But before we get underway, I would like to briefly introduce each of our speakers, who are the authors of this commentary section. So in alphabetical order, we have with us Ana Maria Perez Arredondo, who is a doctoral candidate at the Center for Development Research at the University of Bonn, research fellow at the International Center for Sustainable Development at Bonn-Rhein-Sieg University of Applied Sciences, and coordinator of the One Health and Urban Transformations Graduate School. Dr. Katja Bender is professor of economics, in particular economic and social development, at Bonn-Rhein-Sieg University of Applied Sciences, and director of the International Center for Sustainable Development. Then we also have with us Dr. Petra Danneke, who is professor of development sociology and vice dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Vienna. Then we have Dr. Pedro Goulart, who is assistant professor with tenure at the School of Social and Political Sciences at the University of Lisbon. He was until recently Deputy Director for Research at the Center of Public Administration and Public Policies at the University of Lisbon, and classified as excellent. We also have with us Kai Heath, who is a global health ethics researcher and is completing a doctorate in population health at the Ethox Center at University of Oxford. And finally, we have Dr. Stefanie Meilinger, who is professor of sustainable technologies, especially renewable energies and energy efficiency at Bonn-Rhein-Sieg University of Applied Sciences, and also director of the International Center for Sustainable Development. Now, to open the session, I am pleased to welcome Katja Bender. Katja will be talking about the lead paper she wrote for the commentary section and setting the stage for the preceding roundtable discussion. Before we get going, I also want to draw your attention to a few housekeeping details. Katja will be delivering opening remarks for about 15 minutes, after which we will dive into the roundtable segment for about 25 minutes. During this time, if you could ensure that your microphone is turned off, that would be great. And as we go along, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat, and then we'll put any questions to the speakers to answer during the final 25 minutes of our session. Please be aware that this session is being recorded and will be available in our YouTube library in a few weeks. And with that, let's get things underway. So Katja, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for the introduction. And I'm going to share my screen for a short PowerPoint presentation. So just 1 second, I need to move here and there a little bit, and then we are ready to get started. Okay, so thank you all very much for joining today. And I'm very much looking forward to our discussion. Now I would like to give a short introduction to the commentary section by introducing the main ideas and the background and the main ideas of this section and the leading paper, and also giving an overview of the commentary section. I'm not going too much in depth into the ideas because, well, we are going to have our discussion afterwards, and I, of course, also would like to leave time for this. So just a brief short overview outline of the presentation. I will start with some remarks on terminology. So what do we understand about when we use the term research practice collaboration? Then I would like to present the argument in a nutshell, and then looking a bit more detailed on the expected benefits and risks of research practice collaborations from a political economy perspective, and concluding by giving an overview on the EJDR commentary section. So let us start with the terminology. I think that would be important because we have quite a specific understanding when we use the term research practice collaboration. And as you can see here, it's quite a broad understanding. When we use the term research practice collaborations, we refer to any research activity that proactively involves practitioners at any given stage in the research chain. And you see the proactively is stressed. I'm getting back to this in a moment. Just briefly, practitioners also, as you can see here, another broad understanding. Well, basically, we refer to practitioners as everyone outside academia. So that is broad. Could be public authorities, civil societies, or organization, business, communities, and so on. Defining characteristics is not part of the academic system. So even though this is quite broad, as that certain activities are excluded or are not covered by this term research practice collaborations. Most importantly, research activities, which assign only a passive role to practitioners are not included. What could this mean? For example, if practitioners are included as mere informants only. So for example, in the process of data collection, as interview partners, if this is the only type of involvement, this would not qualify as research practice collaboration because the defining characteristic is the active involvement. Also, if practitioners are just recipients of final research outputs, for example, in traditional scientific policy advice, reports are prepared and then presented to policymakers, for example, but otherwise there is no engagement, no involvement, then well, the understanding here would also not subsume these research activities as research practice collaborations. So what is the basic argument? So if we talk about research practice collaborations, and to keep it short, I might refer from now on to RPCs, or frequently to RPCs. They are no new phenomenon, and we are all aware of the discussion about co-production of knowledge, transdisciplinary research, maybe even participatory research, and all this dates back at least to the 70s, maybe even of the last century and even earlier. But what is maybe new right now is that the so-called third mission, the term refers to the collaboration between researchers and practitioners. So that's the third mission of higher education institution has been gaining a new momentum. And it's also in European scientific policies, higher education policies, it's very present. And there's a lot of debate. And often this debate is characterized by quite an idealistic view of the effects of research practice collaboration, or more specifically, the effects of research practice collaboration on knowledge generation. So there seems to be the assumption that RPCs automatically lead to better knowledge in terms of knowledge which is more relevant to society or improves societal outcomes. So what sometimes seems to be neglected in these policy-driven discussions is that there is not this automatic guarantee, but there are also risk of potential adverse effect. And the reason is that, well, RPCs are not just a technocratic initiatives or an interest-free effort to improve upon the social world, but that they are political in nature. Well, like our collaborative efforts. So actually, if we look at research practice collaborations, we can consider them as a problem of collective action. And to understand what kind of outcomes are generated by research practice collaboration, we need to understand the internal dynamics, the dynamics of social interactions, and also the context into which these interactions are embedded in, and how context influences social interaction and outcomes. And well, this is not the first time that this has been stressed. There is a small but growing literature also on the political economy of research practice collaborations available. And this is also exemplified by the quote you see at the bottom of this slide. Okay, so how should we understand this? Let us maybe start with looking again on the potential beneficial effects of research practice collaboration. And there are actually quite a few rationales and underlying the debate surrounding research practice collaborations. And probably most of you are aware of these basic arguments. And I want to pick up 3 of these. I think these are also the major rationales discussed in the literature or in policy or in, well, in ongoing debates. Most importantly, research practice collaborations are supposed to increase the societal relevance of research. For example, by improving upon the usefulness of research or research outcomes for society, or also by strengthening the probability or likelihood that research results will also be included in decision-making outside academia, so increasing the likelihood for uptake of research. Secondly, they are also considered to positively contribute to the credibility of research. Credibility of research means meeting standards of scientific plausibility, scientific excellence, technical adequacy. So, for example, by improving the formulation of research questions, improving the suitability of empirical methodologies, or even feeding into theory building. And last but not least, also research practice collaborations are considered to enhance the legitimacy of research. And legitimacy in this context means fairness of representation, of voices, of perspectives, and also ethical conduct of research. So, and to understand why these outcomes are supposed to be brought about or realized, basically, yeah, we should look at the social interactions within research practice collaboration and reframe research practice collaboration as a, well, collective active action situation. And most, actually, quite a substantial share of these positive effects are supposedly due to A, the inclusion of multiple actors, and by including multiple actors, information improves and information sharing, flow of information is also improved. So, for example, with respect to societal relevance, more information means that research might be able to better meet the needs of stakeholders included. In addition to that, because research practice collaboration involves ongoing relationships, personalized relationship, and this repeated interaction may increase trust among actors, may also increase a sense of ownership, and this eventually translates into a higher likelihood of research uptake. So pretty much same arguments are put forward for credibility of research, because researchers have better information, they might be better, they are in a better position to formulate research questions and design the research. If it comes to enhancing legitimacy of research, again, we have the multiple actors, better information argument, because if more people are involved, more perspectives are considered, the results of research might be considered as more legitimate. That is one argument. There are actually several arguments. I'm not going through all the arguments, just presenting a few examples. Then by including groups, persons or groups, which are usually excluded, research practice collaboration might strengthen social inclusion. And by strengthening social inclusion, they might even contribute to the redistribution of power relationships, so reducing power imbalances. That is another argument. By including certain actors, they might contribute to empowerment, and the list could go on. But basically, it all boils down to more actors, better information, personalized relationship, and social inclusion. So this sounds nice, promising, and I think these are also compelling arguments. But there are also risks involved, and these risks occur if these characteristics of collective action just mentions change. Starting with, well, we aren't all the same, obviously. And if different people are involved, there might also be multiple and also divergent or conflicting interest. And well, that is another normal feature of everyday life. But also RPCs are not just harmonious spheres of interaction, so there might be conflicts. Conflicts as such are not necessarily a bad thing, because if we have conflicts, it might foster debates and this might create new knowledge. But if conflicts or divergent interests are combined with other factors, this might lead to problems. For example, if we don't have this assumption of complete information, symmetric information, then all the beneficial effects of research practice collaboration might be questioned or reduced, not questioned, but reduced. Just two examples. So ideally, all stakeholders relevant for specific research themes would be included, or represented in an RPC, but often this is not possible. I mean, for example, resources are limited, funding, time is limited, so certain people are excluded and their perspectives are not represented. Also, maybe also natural, often one might have an inclination to form partnerships with people we already know and have cooperated in the past. So that is another selective selection instrument, sort of selection bias. And if we do have this incomplete information, then the knowledge generated by research practice collaboration might not be better, but might also be selective and skewed. So, and then if this is combined with, well, differences in access to information, if some actors involved have private information, so what is commonly termed as asymmetric information, and this is combined with conflict in interest, then actors involved in RPCs might also have then, well, or might seize the opportunity to engage in opportunistic behavior and promoting their own individual agendas, not the collective agenda. For example, and I don't want to step on anyone's toes, that holds for all groups involved, yes, so it's not particular to any one of the group, but for example, policymakers or public officials, they might want to use research to support their own individual political agendas. Then NGOs do not automatically represent the plurality of interests of everyone or of local communities, but they also do have their own agendas, and they might want to foster these agendas in RPCs. And researchers, of course, also do have, we are coming back to researchers later, also might have their own agendas, but researchers might also be aware of this, and they might simply collude because as researcher, I have the interest to get my data, to obtain my data sample, I want to publish later on. So everyone might be aware of this, but you collude in order to get, well, the results which are of relevance for you. I know that is a negative picture and it must not always take place, but the possibility is there. So, and certainly well, let's say harmonious picture of RPCs also seems to assume equal distribution of resources or equal access to resources. Resources could be resources in terms of time, in terms of funding, in terms of decision-making rights. Well, and obviously this must not be the case, or does not have to be the case. And actors having better resources, having more resources or better access to resources are then better positioned to shape processes in a way that it serves their own interests. And well, starting now with researchers. So just again, a few examples. Researchers may be able to invest more time and possibly also have more expertise in developing research proposals. So right from the beginning, researchers are in a better position to bring in their own ideas and own agendas. Then if we look at research funding initiatives, I think that is also very important if we consider international research practice collaboration. Funding initiatives, not always, but well, frequently shaped in a way that they provide funding and leadership or roles to academics, sometimes also to academics and practitioners, but with a focus on academics and practitioners from the global north. So, and obviously this increases asymmetries within the partnerships. Or larger NGOs or larger organizations, government might have a higher visibility and therefore are more likely to be included in research practice collaboration, and smaller NGOs tend to be left out, or there's a risk that they are left out. So these are just a few examples, and this might lead either to opportunistic behavior or, as mentioned, to elite captures that certain interests, well, are, well, better follow up than the interest of the entire group. And obviously, if those risks are present, or if those characteristics are present, then the knowledge generated by research practice collaboration is not necessarily better, of higher societal relevance, or more credible, or more legitimate, but it is also distorted and it's biased. And if we do have unequal distribution or access to resources, then this might even contribute to strengthening or to further exert producing inequalities, so strengthening existing qualities or producing new inequalities. And last but not least, and this is probably also something all of us are aware of or have experienced when engaged in such collaborative research efforts, the transaction costs involved in terms of time, communication, are quite high, or are substantially higher compared to, let's say, more traditional resource. So all in all, there are advantages, but there are also risks, or the risk of disadvantages, and these need to be balanced somehow. And I'm not jumping into conclusions now. I would like to leave it as this, because we are just starting the discussion. Let me just briefly show you an overview of this commentary section. All papers, so all in all, we have 6 papers. And all papers are open access. So if you are interested, you can download these papers. And in these papers and in the comments, we try to provide quite, well, a diverse picture of research practice collaboration. So the contributions either zoom in on specific groups of practitioners, or they address specificities of international research practice collaboration. In addition, contributors, so we come from different disciplinary backgrounds, so either within the social sciences or humanities, but also including perspectives from non-social scientists, so from technical sciences or natural sciences, because Stephanie, she's bringing in engineering perspective, but she herself is a physicist. And we also include both senior and also junior researcher perspectives. And with this, we hope we can, of course, not cover the entire field, which is quite broad, but provide insights into different aspects of research practice collaborations. And with this, I would like to conclude for now. Well, not conclude, but hand over to Sarah again. And thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thanks so much, Katja, for that. And you've given us a lot to think about and chew over. And before we proceed to the roundtable section of the event, we actually we're curious about what you think, our audience. We want to know what your experiences have been like with an RPC, if you've ever been involved in one. And for that purpose, we've prepared a poll, which you should be seeing now on the screen. There's 3 questions. Okay, cool. So I think most of you have answered. Let me just share the results. Okay. So 56% of you seem to think that RPCs strengthen the relevance of scientific knowledge outside academia. Also the same for RPCs improving upon the credibility of research. And also the same percentage for the third question. So 56% of you think that RPCs do enhance the legitimacy of research. Okay, it would be interesting to hear from the people who answered sometimes. But maybe we can get into that in the plenary discussion in the final 25 minutes. So thank you everyone for answering. And now I think we will go to the speaker interventions. And for that, I'd like to invite Anna. You're up first.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Should I share my slides, or you can also do it?
I'll do that.
On my behalf. Good, thank you. So thanks for the invitation. I'm happy to be here, and for the next 2 to 3 minutes, this is a first. I will have to introduce you to the One Health concept, and also to the project that we have at the Center for Development Research on this concept. So I was invited to take part of this commentary session because the One Health concept is a very holistic approach that fits very well to what Katja just mentioned on research practice collaboration. So it's inherently a research, it needs research practice collaborations to be able to exist. So what I'm going to talk about, it's a case study. And please, Sarah, go to the next slide. Yeah, that is the first slide. So when I mention a One Health, you might be wondering what is One Health. So One Health, it finds its place at the interface of humans, animals, and environment. Where those three spheres are connected, that is the place for action of One Health. And this concept is a holistic approach that mobilizes multiple sectors, disciplines, and communities, because of course there are different people from different backgrounds working with animal health and animal welfare. Some other people from different backgrounds and different disciplines are looking at human health, and a whole different bunch of researchers and professionals are looking at environmental health and environmental conservation. So while putting together and making people aware of these connections, they are looking to achieve well-being, ecosystem conservation, the maintaining the natural resources that we have, and also providing clean energy, making sure to make available clean water and clean air to people in different areas of the world, to achieve food security, climate protection, and addressing climate change, and also sustainable development. So in a very few words, you already have the first picture of what One Health is. So next slide, please. So with this very holistic approach, the Center for Development Research with other partners, mostly based in Bonn, the Hochschule Bonn-Rhein-Sieg and the United Nations University at the Institute for Environmental and Human Security, they applied to a fund from the Ministry of Culture and Science of the state where we are, North Rhine-Westphalia, to create a graduate school. And this graduate school has the mandate to promote transdisciplinary research. So it means that we took a concept that includes different sectors and different professions, and we have by our donor the mandate of doing the same. If that was not enough, by the concept that we were receiving, this One Health, we have to do it. So we are doing that in the way that the graduate school, it's based at the University of Bonn, which is awarding the degrees to the doctoral students on its different faculties. Then we have the coordinating body that is split by the three institutions that are managing the project, the Hochschule Bonn-Rhein-Sieg, the Center for Development Research, and the United Nations University. And each of the students being subscribed to the different faculties, agreeing with the supervisors on a specific topic, they go to different research areas to implement the research and to gather the data. And there they are based in India, at the Indian Institute of Public Health in Gandhinagar, in Accra, the capital of Ghana, at the Institute for Statistics, Social and Economic Research of the University of Ghana. And in Sao Paulo, at the University of Sao Paulo, we work with two faculties, the Faculty of Economics and the Faculty of Pharmaceutical Sciences. And those implementation partners, they make sure that the graduate students, they have some practice partners where they find the applications of the research that they are carrying. The next slide, please. So we started in 2017. And with this huge concept that we had at hand, we were looking at different, splitting it and looking specifically at the food systems, One Health governance, and urban blue and green spaces, how the health is affected by the design in the cities. One of the learnings and why research practice collaborations, why this reflection on how they work and the balance that they apply, it's because also in the One Health, we find a lot of inequalities. We are trying to look at a balance of the health and the interdependencies of the health of humans, the health of animals, and environmental conservation. But in reality, is that the health of humans is a priority, and the way of looking at the well-being and welfare of animals is independent of which value they have for the humans. And we are also changing the environment in relation to the value that it's provided to the humans. So the first issue came that the One Health concept is not very equilibrated. There are a lot of imbalances, but with the constellation as well that we created in the graduate school with all the different partners, that happened as well. Like the different disciplines and different expertise was in mismatch to the objectives of the donor, the objective of the managing committee, and the objectives of the implementation body. So when we came to the phase 2 that started in 2021, we decided to align all the research works under one big umbrella that was food systems. So at this point, we could align already under one umbrella how we were looking at One Health addressing food systems, looking at the governance and implementation, antimicrobial resistance, and One Health surveillance. The next slide, please. So at the end of the day, and that is also what you found in the commentary section, we found that our call, our work for this research school and for going forward with research practice collaboration was to make people aware of the interface where humans, animals, and the environment come together. And this is one exercise that whenever we go to talk, for example, to school children, this is one of the common exercises that we do with them. And perhaps if you are today to learn something from my talk is to identify those. So the first thing that I will ask you to do is to think, if you have a pet, think of that pet. If you have a plant in your room, in your house, think of that plant. And already you have identified the interaction with an animal or with the plant. If you don't have either of those, think of the birds that you see every day when you walk. So once we identify those interactions, the second thing is to think, what are those animals, plants, or yourself? What is it needed for the well-being? So it's usually things related to the environment, to the biophysical environment. It's food, and it's a clean and comfortable area to be. So at the biophysical environment, we already found the interactions, but those interactions are of course ruled by social, political, and cultural determinants, and by some drivers of change. So the way we interact with our pet has to do a lot with the culture where we live, the understanding that we have of those interactions with the pet, the use that we have for the pet. Is that for company? Is it for food? And then also different changes that happen, like globalization happens, climate change happens. How are those affecting also those interactions? And at the end of the day, they are reflected on the health of myself, the health of my pet, the health of my plant. So yes, I think that this was the last slide. And one of the conclusions that we achieved was that is the same call for our graduate school in terms of research practice collaboration, that the benefit that we are adding in terms of the work that we do is that we are building a new generation of scientists. Besides scientists, we are also making people aware of those interactions in their own disciplines. So without further ado, I would really like to, I'm looking forward for the discussion, and yeah, I give back the word to the chair. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Anna. Petra, you're next.
Yeah, Thank you very much. I will do it a little bit different, but Anna, thanks for your summarizing. In my response, I was actually, and I don't want to describe the project now in length, just to say it was a project, an Erasmus EU project on capacity building in transdisciplinary. So we started with the capacity in transdisciplinary and with partners from the global north and from the global south. And so what I shortly will present regarding the research practice collaboration, which was one part of the project, but it was of course also the collaboration between the researchers. And I would just want to share not some findings, but also some reflections. And I will also relate to what Katja said before, because I do think we have a lot of studies which describing the problems we do face, also especially in regarding the collaboration between researchers and practitioners. Dealing with this, I also think we have a lot of guidelines and strategies which have been developed to actually improve this kind of collaboration. But what I personally think what really lacks the discourse is to really analyze what doesn't work, and trying to understand also why it doesn't work. And the why is often a little bit missing, and their points Katja made already come in. It's power structures, of course. It's also north-south colonial legacies we do face, but it's of course also other categories like gender, age, nationality, whatever we might think of. So I want to propose, and that's also what I'm arguing in my response, is to look more on power relations and on power structures actually on different level, and not to take the groups as homogeneous groups. I think neither practitioners nor researchers are, so to speak, a homogeneous group, even though it reads always a little bit like this, because we are all differently embedded and the local context to play a role here. What I'm always a little bit struck is also the terminology we use, and that's, I wanted to come back also to Katja's presentation, and I'm also discussing this. Do we speak of information or do we speak of knowledge? What do we actually want from practitioners? Yeah, do they, so to speak, should serve science, our research? And at one point you said they shouldn't, but then the question is, what's the difference between knowledge and information actually? What do we actually want from them? Do we expect that their knowledge or their inclusion should challenge the status quo, or to serve the existing social relations, serve the certain topic? So I think we have to more think about what we actually expect from this kind of collaborations, and then to conclude what is also our role in it. And I also am always stuck by the term stakeholder, honestly, when we talk about research practice collaboration, because it's a pure managemental term, and it also stands for information to a certain extent. And I wonder whether the terminology actually relates to certain understandings, which might be the reason why often problems occurs in these collaborations. And we also hardly ever discuss about the understanding of science and knowledge by the researchers involved, and they might be different, especially also in this North-South context, where we have different university cultures, but where also the researchers are differently embedded, have different positionalities. And there are a lot of things I would like to go a little bit deeper into, not always arguing what is the problem, but also what's the reason, what lies behind the problems. And to do that, and that's the last 2 points, I think, and I'm a sociologist, and I think what we actually need is to include more feminist and post-colonial perspectives as the starting point, which allow us to reflect the positionality of the involved actors, especially also our positionalities, and to understand power relations, North-South power relations, of course, in case of North-South projects, but also how they intersect with other categories like gender, age, nationality, positionality, also our standing within the university hierarchies, for example. I mean, there are a lot of things together, and I would actually hope that we will have more research and analysis regarding the problems behind, or what actually leads to the problems Katja scrutinized in the beginning. Thanks.
Thanks, Petra. Petrol, your turn.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here, following the opportunity to our engaging in this discussion in the European Journal of Development Research. We did something slightly different. We look to this co-production voice in policy making, and we give emphasis also on the context, and particularly we look to the case of Portugal as some kind of representative of European periphery. I will come back to this. We first try to acknowledge the importance of the different types of knowledge. Here we work a bit with Vigar and Goulart and Tavares, that they identify the 4 types of knowledges: technical knowledge, local knowledge, practice-centered knowledge, and political knowledge. And how the challenges of involving different types of knowledges that are available, and then the problem is what do you want to engage and when, and with which intensity. And this is a difficulty in every processes of policy making, and also in research. How can we do this, especially if we are thinking on a research with impact, with societal impact. On this focus on co-production implies interlocutors, implies organizations and individuals willing and available and capable of engaging in these interactions. Recently, in one of the projects I am involved, there was a reaction of somebody that was very interesting. We were asking, this project had this intervention, and we were asking for contributions from the workers of the organization that was involved in the implementation. We allowed for comments, but we actually suggested that the comments were anonymous. Because either to avoid the fear of negative consequence on the opinion of the person, but also sometimes even avoiding the possibility of also of expecting a reward, and therefore we suggested anonymity. But one of the persons that was participating, she was saying, I want to participate, but I want to be acknowledged as an expert. I want to be acknowledged as I want to give my name and my qualifications, because this is important for you to access. And this is one example how these different knowledges sometimes get into tension, because we were looking for local knowledge, for experience on this specific intervention, but the person then is also asking for no, I want to be evaluated as to be able to contribute as a technical knowledge, and this tension is there. In our piece, we also suggest, remember that RPCs and all of these issues change in space and time. And that's why we focus in Portugal. Portugal, as in European periphery, things work differently than, for example, in Germany. At the same time, we also look to Portugal throughout time. And how did these clashes between different knowledges change throughout the Portuguese contemporaneous history, and things were considerably different because Portugal in the last 70 years changed considerably, and in these changes the legitimacy of different knowledges were considerably changing, and the power of different knowledge also changed. Here, schooling, we suggested schooling, citizenship, and empowerment provide a case for enhanced community participation. At the same time, individualism and increased alternatives of use of time decrease participation. And therefore, we have here a lot of tension between the different aspects. And this is not only a work from me, but also from my co-author, Roberto Falanga. And particularly his contribution comes on participatory budget initiatives. We have a look into these. This is particularly interesting because in contrast to many other issues, this has a south to north influence. It started in Brazil. From Brazil, it came to Portugal, and in a sense, reverting the traditional trends. The diffusion also also has an importance between connections a bit. Well, it had an influence from the left in Brazil, it came through the left in Portugal, and eventually for the mainstreaming, then things changed. And for the mainstreaming, it needed alliances and general acceptance. This in here, the importance of the framing of the discourse, the framing of and relating to more general elites have also an important part, and therefore again this tension between the different knowledges had to evolve throughout all this process. And with this, I would finish.
Excellent. Thank you, Pedro. Kai, you're up.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the invite to be involved in this this series. It's been really interesting to engage. I'm just not in the sort of, I noticed that we're slipping through the time a little bit. I think I'm just going to focus on two of the key points that are coming out of the commentary that we wrote. So my co-author Maru Mormina and I linked RPCs to co-production and the impact agenda in research. We wanted to focus on these two really sort of defining qualities of co-production, and we think that they deserve a bit more attention than they have been getting in the literature, particularly because there's some ethical implications around RPCs that we think that they can address. So these are epistemic equality and community representation and inclusion in research. So to talk quickly about the first one of those, epistemic equality. So it was something that Katja noted in her lead paper, that if research is really going to contribute to societal change, then that cannot be done without addressing the questions of equity within the research collaboration itself. And that's particularly true in international development, as others have mentioned, with the history that's marred by colonialism, and still today we find unfair research practices and power imbalances as well. The contention that we put forward in the commentary was that equal and symmetrical relationships in these research collaborations don't really depend solely on an ethics of collaboration that's just upheld by the partners in those collaborations. But it's more of a case of looking at the structural systems and the structural injustices that are around the research collaborations themselves that are creating asymmetries. We particularly wanted to look at that from an epistemic perspective, and we looked at the sort of entrenched epistemic hierarchies that can come from academia, particularly looking at things in an evidence-based and empiricist way that can sometimes devalue forms of knowledge, such as experiential knowledge or cultural knowledge or experiences. And these sort of power imbalances and hierarchies within the design of the research and within the structures can lead to a really unbalanced system of collaboration and co-production. And at times they can turn RPCs into a vehicle for just pushing your knowledge from your research into practice, rather than actually viewing it as an active learning process. In terms of what that means in practicality, it could mean reforming how research is funded and who you allocate those funds to. And it could potentially mean a new set of standards by which you evaluate research. I think acknowledging these relationships is a crucial thing in itself, and hopefully it can lead to a more thoughtful design of research. A final comment on the epistemic equality is that we might need to maybe look at defining impact in a way that's not purely metric driven or efficiency focused, and trying to value the process of reciprocal transformation on both partners' sides during the process of collaboration. The final thing that we focused on in our commentary was looking at the question of inclusion and representation, and trying to move away from a purely bilateral formulation of RPCs. And so this is particularly, we wanted to focus on the involvement of community in the discussion. We used an example that's been brought up in Thailand called the triangle that moves the mountain strategy. And there seems to be a bit more traction discussion that nowadays. So the concept of that is that when community actors, practitioners and researchers become mutually involved and invested in a research process, then knowledge can be co-produced that is much more contextually valuable and responsive to whatever it is that you're trying to address through that research, whether it's health, education, or whatever social issue it may be. So we propose that by making sure that this triangle of actors are involved in the collaboration, that there can be a genuine process of building trust and relationship building, which go above that formulation of looking at a purely instrumental reason for collaboration and actually seeing it as more of a learning process. And I think that's everything from our paper. So yeah, thank you. Looking forward to engaging more.
Fantastic, Guy. Thank you. Stephanie, you're next.
Yeah, hello everybody. For me, it's really interesting to be in this round because being a physicist, environmental scientist, and teaching engineers, it's an interesting perspective, the social science perspective, which I don't encounter every day. Well, I actually was looking at Katja's paper from the perspective of somebody who has been working in industry and research and development, product development. So reflecting her thoughts on this background on the one hand, and on the other hand, with my profession being a professor teaching sustainable engineering being a new type of doing engineering, considering environmental and social aspects as well as economic aspects in the engineering process. So I've been reflecting on how to teach that and how to actually do that for now, well, probably 15 years. So this is the background of my reflection of what Katja was writing, and I found it was very interesting because it really reflects in product development. In product development, usually in companies, that's done because you want to have something new, you want to put it on the market. So how do you do that? You actually involve potential customers because you want to know what they think, what they want, and you want to do the products that you can sell afterwards. So there have been quite some methodologies being developed in the recent years. For instance, sit next to your potential customer, observe him, and then come up with what he needs. Do interviews, do statistical research on market opportunities. All these tools are somehow used and not often taught systematically to young engineers. They're rather busy with physics and mathematics and so on. But this is what happens in research and development. So practitioners are always somehow involved. However, if you look on this is relevance, you use them to tell you what is needed. But with regard to legitimacy and credibility, what came up to my mind was what is actually asked for in the definition of sustainable development. We should look to the needs of present and future generations, and especially on the needs of the poor. And this is also sustainable product development. And then I was thinking, okay, how are we doing that actually? And there are some approaches, for instance, trying to include the perspectives of older people who are often neglected, or of people who don't have that much money. And in this whole process of transformative research, this is addressed. So there are people dealing with these questions, but it's not commonly done. So and then it is in there, but it's not that popular. And I think there is need to really improve this part. And our actual research, the way we are financed as researchers is not taking this into account. For instance, the energy research program in Germany requires 20% of the money has to come from some company partners. So this is the way they try to have researchers from academia consider real practitioner needs. But then these companies actually tell you what the research questions are, or you convince them that your ideas of research have something to do with them, and then you design the research project. So very similar to what you just described. So somehow the question is, how do we actually involve what is needed, environmental issues, social issues in product development? Is not very well set up. So this is one part. The other part is, Katja talked about the power asymmetries and the different interests, and how do we put that into our product development. I'm actually dealing with life cycle assessment, and within life cycle assessment, we have environmental aspects. We have also life costing, which includes economic aspects. And there is a tool like social LCA, which tries to include production circumstances, like social situation of workers, of other stakeholders involved. And this tries to put up criteria and numbers, let's say, that we can include in product development right from the beginning. And I have a project where we do that with CO2, which is the easiest part actually, and which is more common than the other aspects, in order to put these aspects right from the beginning of new products into our thoughts. So we have a project where we look into a light carbon material in order to have not as heavy trucks and use less fuel. And while we develop it, we also see what the production process actually takes as environmental footprints, and try to do this in a very systematic way as a research project. Not always finding the answers that our partners from industry want us to find, because as researchers we are, well, sometimes sticking into the places where they don't really have an interest, but we do it. But this is a procedure that's actually very promising, and we do it there with just with one criteria, with CO2, but you also can do it with several criteria. We had another project where we were doing placement of infrastructure for loading of electrical vehicles, and we used money and an environmental parameter into that, and then you get not one answer, but you get a whole line of answers, and this is called multi-dimensional optimization. So you get so-called Pareto fronts, and you have a clear view on possible solutions, but it's not a one solution, it's a number of solutions, and this helps the decision makers to see actually what type of consequences their decision has. So because a human just can do 7, let's say, decision between 7 things. So you have to prepare the decision room in such a way. And that was the other thing that came up to my mind, and which is in that paper as ideas of approaches how to deal with conflicts of interest from an engineering perspective. However, I see this power asymmetry everywhere. And I think we should also teach our engineers in conflict management, because I think this is just something human, and to make them aware that there is not a 1 and 0 decision, but that it's also a decision that has to be done by evaluating interests and dealing with conflicting interests in, you know, normal human situations. So I want to stop here. And thanks for all these thoughts that came up to my mind reading your input.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. And since we're kind of in the last 20 minutes and a bit behind schedule, I'm going to suggest that we blend the plenary section with the roundtable discussion. And yeah, the audience, if you now have the chance to ask questions, you can put them into the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question, please feel free to do that. And if anyone doesn't have a question right away, maybe I'll ask one right off the bat. Stephanie, maybe I'll come to you with this question, and anyone else who'd like to jump in can as well. But since you said that you come from an engineering background, and that's sort of the lens that you took in your paper as well, I was wondering what can the different disciplines learn from one another? What insights do you think, for instance, engineering can offer? What innovative methods for designing RPCs could we derive from that area of expertise?
I think we are actually trying to develop the best, or to come up with the best technical solution. But the question is, who tells us what is best? And we don't learn how to actually get this information in a way that different interests are balanced in that. And I see that at our institute, that the type to put up a questionnaire, for instance, is something that you really have to learn, and we don't learn that. And I think this is something where we really could, well, profit from sharing. I think the other thing is really use these mathematical approaches, how to deal with areas of ambiguity in solutions. This is probably something you can learn from different types of mathematical approaches from engineering.
Okay, thank you for that. Petra, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? Do you have a
question? No, I don't have a question. I want to go back to what Francesco actually wrote, and what just became clear also when Stephanie was talking. I think it's really important that we think about what we actually want with this kind of collaboration, what we expect, and also what we might need. And I do think, and it's completely clear, to get an idea how certain products should look like, or whether they could be improved. I mean, that's what I imagine after your explaining them without being familiar with it. How can it be used? How it's practicable whatsoever is something different than if we talk about to integrate knowledge for knowledge production. You know, I mean, to create some kind of different or new knowledge, from my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, but I still think we have to talk about really the terms and what the terms implies, and what do we actually expect, because I can also think in social science that we have a collaboration with however we call it now, practitioners, where we just need some kind of information, but then there are others where it's where we look for co-production of knowledge. Also the way Kai was actually relating to it. And then the question is what makes these processes complicated and how do we enter such collaborations?
Thanks, Petra. I see other people have their hands up. So Savis, would you like to go next?
Yes, hello everyone. First, maybe I need to thank everyone for the presentation, and I may need to introduce myself. I'm associate professor at NTNU and also urban planning researcher at Oslo Met. And I'm very happy to hear all the presentation because I think what I have done in my PhD was a kind of summary of all the topics you have touched. I was looking at the co-location case of campus development in Trondheim. And the reason was that this city is going to be knowledge city. So it's actually about research, practice, collaboration. And the idea or the solution they had was to make them geographically being close to each other to increase the collaboration between them. And this idea is going back to 1996. And still they are working on it. So my question was that how is the governance practices have been in the planning and decision-making process? Why these processes have been up and down and it still is going on? Why there have been so many resistance? So this ideal of collaboration never have been happened. And my results show all the kind of the things you have been discussed. Is about the personality of people who are involved. Is about which actors have been there. It's about the organizational culture. Is about like the difference between social and technical disciplines. So everything is about the individual's mindset, how we actually have kind of get used to these ideas. And my kind of conclusion is that, yes, the society is transforming. All this collaboration, all these ideas are great, but we haven't built the culture. So many of us talking about co-creation, democracy, collaboration, but we don't have the culture of it. We haven't established the culture of collaboration. So still we don't know how to communicate with each other. We don't know how to collaborate. We don't know, how, like, what does it even mean? How we should measure it. And everything is going back to kind of the mindset shift. And this is my current research. What I have, like my research question is that how we individual can become more collaborative in our daily life, in our family, in our society. So what should I I suggest is that we mainly talk about research and practice, but what is the kind of the missing list is education. We forget education, and we need also to transform this education, which focus on kind of new skills, soft skills, communication, collaboration, because we come up with the kind of the social belief and the norms that goes back to the era that we haven't had this culture of collaboration. So if we want to learn how to collaborate, we need new type of education. And we are lucky that we live in Europe and we have this kind of culture of democracy and inclusion and get used to sustainability, but not all kind of the world does not get used to it. And since I come from Iran, so you know what is happening there, everything is about mindset. They are kind of fighting for dictatorship, but people don't have the mindset of how to solve conflict because they haven't learned it. They are just copying the government themselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see we have a few other hands up. Kai, would you like to respond to the question in the chat?
Yeah, so thanks, Sebastian, for the question in the chat. So just to read that out, if people can't see the chat. So it's what to do if types of knowledge clash and are irreconcilable, e.g. scientific agricultural knowledge versus experiential knowledge of smallholder farmers. So that's a very good point. So I'm coming from the health systems perspective, from population health research. I think something that comes to mind in terms of this kind of question is that there's a danger sometimes, maybe historically, hopefully it's sort of diminishing now, but there's a danger to see community engagement as something that you do either as a sort of an agenda setting process at the start or a dissemination activity at the end of your intervention, or I suppose this goes for international development research as well to an extent. I think what we were trying to propose in our commentary here was to have much more of an iterative process of community engagement during a research program, and to make sure that there's a constant dialogue going on between all of the key partners in order to, whether it's you're looking to scale up your intervention at the end of the process, or whether you're looking to get your research into policy. But ultimately, it might, to answer your question a bit specifically, I think is obviously there can be specific cultural factors or traditions that may potentially clash with modern research. I think you would hope to be able to have sort of a mutual learning and capacity building process between the researchers and the community members, so that you can actually meet somewhere in the middle. So I think that would be my response to that.
Thank you. I think we have more stuff, so I won't get back to you now and back and forth, but thank you very much.
Right, thanks, Kai. Stephanie, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I would like to point out actually two ways of relationship, which I think we should distinguish. One is a practitioner comes to you as a researcher with a question because he or she knows that you actually can provide an answer because you have this expertise. Then actually the interaction works quite well. The other thing is you as a researcher know how things could go better because you just, well, you have more insight, more information, but you also believe that you have the better solution. And then you try to find somebody to take this up because you are helpless, and because at your position you can't actually put this into into reality. And then you run around and you're looking for this practitioner, and sometimes you just don't find anybody because you are ahead of your time, or the people you address are just not interested. And I think this is a situation where probably you try to convince somebody, and then there exists some collaboration, but this is probably on a very, very bad or very weak basis. And I think we should distinguish these two situations. I know these two situations from engineering, at least.
Okay, thanks. Katja, did you have any remarks?
Yes, thank you. Just maybe starting with just setting up on the relationships. Also, I think there are also two other options, two further options, additional option in terms of relationships, initiating a dialogue between researchers and practitioners or collaboration. One is actually not that me as a researcher, I have produced some results and I think they are relevant and would like to share it, but also that me as a researcher, I have the feeling that I need to learn more about certain societal problems, and therefore I need the input from people outside academia. I think it's a mutual learning process. And I think there's also another type of relationship which, well, might be driven by any of those, and in addition to that, simply by funding. Maybe this most certainly is also more related to the European funding landscape, because there are funds, so people apply for funds, and that brings them together. So quite a well, materialistic motivation. And that this would also lead to, this would have been actually my original comment, because I also wanted to respond to Petra. You were asking the question you need to ask, what do we want from these collaborations? And I think that is something, I mean, which of course we also discussed. Who is the we? And I would say there's not a we, and we need to understand the individual agendas which of people involved in these collaboration. I think that is also something which comes out from available research, that one major issues also in terms of transaction costs, conflicts, is a lack of shared goals and a lack of shared interests. So I'm actually questioning the we. The we is a group which formed, it might be there, but it's not given for granted that there is actually a we. So if we talk about what do we want, there are different persons who want different things. And in terms of what you also raised in your commentary, and I totally agree. Now I'm getting back to information and knowledge. Information and knowledge for sure is not the same. Information may be one input for knowledge generation, and it depends if information, first of all, is taken up or if it's interpreted, but it's not the same. It's just one possible input. Thank you.
Thanks, Katja. Petro, you've had your hand up for a while.
Just to come back to some of these comments, these very interesting comments regarding Francesco, I agree that, well, all the terminology is difficult, and then obviously there are implications regarding what to expect from which partner and so on. Here, my suggestion is also that one size does not fit all, and one should design some kind of projects that are intensive in interactions, others not as much. You can have one recipe that will fit all type of research, and you have to some will benefit more from these interactions, others not. But obviously, as you point out, there is always here judgment calls that are difficult, and who will make them those. This is an issue. Regarding the clash of knowledges, I think this is from Sebastian. This is these are indeed an issue, and again, following this through, not always is clear who will decide. In projects with larger stakeholders involvement, naturally they will have a bigger stake on this. At a point in time, it's also useful that researchers can just go and pick the brains out of some people. And this is again how can we organize and design this? But it relates a lot to this to the type of project. Because and this is the hard part that when I was depicting the story of Portugal, because the knowledge has moments that that is important, more important to be harvested. In other moments, there is less legitimacy about this. This brings me a bit about the clients of social science, and this is really an issue. This is an issue that is important, but and this is the old problem that is more accepted in natural sciences, but social science has the same problem. Sometimes you have fundamental research, and fundamental research needs more clear support, while others clearly has to take more care of these of the interests of the clients and respond to the general social society. Last remark, just to say that as another person said, we need to learn how to cooperate, because this is probably the most difficult thing, especially in faculties, and especially, for example, in Southern Europe. In Southern Europe, the difference between academia and the society is much larger than in other cases, and to bridge this gap, we really have to go out of the tower of academia, and we are very stratified societies, and this gap sometimes is very large. When I'm saying I have different profiles. If I say I'm an economist, they say something to me. If I say I'm a university professor, they will say something else.
Thanks, Pedro. Petra.
Yeah, just two short remarks to Katja. With the we, I didn't refer to this PC I referred to the literature you were presenting, actually. You know, what is that we have a lot of guidelines and methodological questions and technical ones. I was referring to this whole bunch, the summary of your literature. One point I would like to make to what Sebastian has actually written, and that also relates to what Barbara says in her remark. I do think the problem is that it's often not clear, at least not in our project, it was clear that we did have different understandings of science and that we also had different understandings of knowledge, yeah, and the role of knowledge also in and for society. And I do think, therefore, the point Barbara makes that it needs time, which is never taken into account, that such processes, that's often we start with the same assumption because we use the same terms, or we talk about agriculture and think we understand everybody wants the same. I think we need more time and we need more space actually also to discuss different understandings of science, of knowledge, of relevance, of certain perspectives. And I think, Barbara, it is a question of all the points you mentioned, but I think within this context, we as participants are different, have different positions, and that's also difficult to reflect because it's often we as researchers from the global north still have the responsibility for the projects. We are the ones who are transferring money and so on. So also these frameworks, the financial frameworks, are reproducing certain power structures, and I think we need to be aware. But I think time and space to often figure out what are the different understandings, or we take a same approach and then interpret it differently. It needs time to really discuss this beforehand, I personally think.
Okay, thank you for that, Petra. And since we're just about out of time, I'm going to let that be the very final remark for today. I just want to take a minute to thank everyone for discussing, for commenting, for asking questions. And if you do have any additional questions, I think you can forward, like if you would like, we would accept these questions by email and we can forward them to the speakers. And a big thank you to the speakers and everyone who attended. And please remember that this recording will be up on YouTube in a few weeks, so you can watch it back then. And yeah, thanks everyone again, and have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.